So I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today, our folks here in the room. I'd like to thank you all online for joining us. This is our Preventing Falls in Construction OSHA stand down, hosted by RETTEW and the Harrisburg area of OSHA. So for the folks in the room, if we can, please turn off or silence your cell phones. The meeting will run from 9:30 to 11. Now, if you're online and you have questions, please put them in the chat, and we will collect them for our roundtable discussion. Those of you in the room, please hold your questions till we get to our roundtable discussion. So with that, I want to introduce myself. My name is Sean Davidson. I am the HSE team lead here for RETTEW. I've been here since November, and this is an event that RETTEW had taken part in years ago before COVID. It kind of went on hiatus, and this is an event that we would like to continue to do moving forward with some of our partners in the community. Because again, the point of this meeting is we want prevention of injuries and we want people to go home safe. So with that, I will introduce Mr. Kevin Chambers, the OSHA Area Director for the Harrisburg OSHA office. Kevin?
Morning, everybody, and everybody out in TV land. So, we are delighted to be here once again for Fall Safety Stand Down. I mean, as I was saying earlier, that while all safety and health is very important to OSHA, this is sort of like Super Bowl week for us because this is one of the very few times during the year that we get a lot of positive press coverage and a lot of good things coming out about the things we're trying to do, as the name implies, prevent falls in construction. As I was introduced before, obviously, my name is Kevin Chambers. I'm the area director here in Harrisburg. And the Harrisburg area office, we cover 14 counties in south central Pennsylvania. There's 6 area offices in the Commonwealth. So if you look up the information online and wish to speak with any of the area offices and ask questions about fall protection or anything related to safety and health, please feel free to do so. Calling and asking a question is not going to trigger an inspection. That's a common fallacy out there. But getting to the topic that's at hand, as somebody who came up through the agency doing a lot of construction safety and health inspections, fall protection is something that I hold very close to my safety and health soul, because we've seen a lot of bad things happen, and very rarely do we ever get to highlight the positive things that occur in industry when people look to try to mitigate the fall risk as they're doing their daily work. Nobody expects to get hurt on the job. I mean, nobody gets up in the morning, goes into work, comes on the job site, puts a hard hat and busy vest and gloves and everything else that we need to have on, and say, today's that day. Today is the day I'm not going home. And it's critical for people to maintain that personal situational awareness, as well as be cognizant of the well-being of their coworkers, and for people that in a position of responsibility to make sure that they're doing the right thing to take care of their people properly. So I've always looked at fall protection. It's not a one-size-fits-all process. We encounter a lot of individual people and say, we use a rope grab system. The rope grab system is good enough for me. It's worked for me, it worked for my father, it worked for my brother, and everything else. And then they end up in a type of job where it's just not a good fit. And the one thing I found is critically important is that if you've got a set of fall protection equipment that's sitting in the truck, it's in your toolbox, job box, whatever else you're using, and it's been the same one that you've been using day in and day out for years, maybe that's a little bit of time for you to have some warning bells go off in your head, because these things do degrade over time, as well as your training goes stale after a while. And the fact is that I had fall protection training in 1994. A lot's changed. What's interesting is there's been a lot of engineered solutions that have come out. And what's interesting about the engineered solutions over time is that they've developed a subculture in construction safety to where I look at selecting fall protection equipment no different than how a golfer selects a club. You're going to have the right equipment to do the right thing you needed to do on the job site, just like a golfer when they swing the club. They want the ball to go here, they want the ball to go here, they want the ball to do this. Obviously, those type of people are doing an on-the-spot assessment for what they need their equipment to do. And nothing changes with fall protection. It's a matter of doing that, on-the-spot evaluations. The job hazard analysis, a critical portion of it. But in time, just like your training, your JHA can go stale as the job begins to evolve. And that's the thing about construction is you're either building something basically out of nothing, or you have something and you're bringing it down to nothing or turning it into something else. And everything involved that has to do with change. And as soon as the job site changes, maybe your fall protection equipment needs change as well. So to wrap up, one of the key things I like to bring up whenever I ever have any opportunity for discussion in front of safety and health professionals or really anybody is I encourage the folks that are on this call, because we have a lot of safety and health leaders, a lot of tangential businesses and suppliers and whatnot. And one of the key things I always talk about is listen to your people. Don't make, you don't have to be the smartest person in the room all the time. Listen to your people. They're the ones out there, they're the ones exposed to the risk. Obviously, you have a responsibility for them, and they have a responsibility for themselves and for their coworkers as well. If they bring something up that they think is dumb, different, or dangerous, listen to what they have to say. Maybe that's something that can be easily explained away with, hey, here's the book, here's our guidance, here's our manufacturer's information, here's our company policy best practice. We're doing it the right way. This may seem to be different than what you were experienced with before, but different doesn't necessarily mean wrong. But if you open up that book and they go, see, right there, you may have actually had some opportunity to prevent somebody from having one of the worst days of their professional career. So I appreciate the opportunity to be invited. We look forward to the panel conversation. Sean Rinaldi, the Harrisburg Area Office's Compliance Assistant Specialist, is here as well. And we look forward to hearing what you have to say, and hopefully don't try to play stump the OSHA guys, because we're going to do our best to try to be able to answer you. So we appreciate the opportunity to be here. Everyone's 30 seconds over.
Hey, no worries. Thank you, Kevin. So, and with that, I would also like to introduce you. We'll hear from some of our other panelists in their presentations, but we do have Sean Rinaldi here, as Kevin said. We have Daniel Larson from the OSHA consultation program out of IUP. We have Mr. Eric Hoffman from the Department of Labor and Industry. We have Mr. Ed Kaufman, who is our RETTEW training manager. And then we have Miss Ashley Luce, and she is RETTEW's safety consulting manager. As well as myself, I will be also on the panel. So thank you, Kevin, for those great remarks. And thank you to everybody for being here today for this great event. So with that, we're going to open the event with a video that our RETTEW staff had put together, and what fall protection means to us, or me, here at RETTEW.
Fall protection means to me is that we're taking the extra time to set up everything properly, making sure we have the right gear in place, not trying to take shortcuts to just get a job done.
To me, fall protection is extremely important because it saves lives every year in the workplace. So what fall protection means to me is having a plan in place so that you can go home to your family at the end of each day.
Safety to me means minimizing exposure to risk and trying to avoid risk normalization.
Okay. And with that, we're going to introduce Mr. Daniel Larson out of the IUP OSHA consultation program. Dan is going to speak with us on the importance of fall protection, fall stand down, and some current statistics.
Well, pleasure to be here and meet a lot of you people. I'm Dan Larson with the Pennsylvania OSHA consultation program. And as Kevin was saying, fall protection is such an important topic, and we're happy to be here and, support this effort. Let's see here. Just a few slides here. Of course, again, I'm Dan. If you've never heard of the Pennsylvania OSHA consultation program, it's located at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. There's safety and health consultants there. If you're a small business, you can actually get free support. So, it's a good program. If you have questions about it, just feel free to stop and talk to me. Again, this event is running from May 6th to 10. It's a big event. Like Kevin said, it's a Super Bowl for OSHA. And as a health and safety consultant, I tell people I get in, I just said this morning, I get in a hospital one day and I'll be in a chicken plant the next day. And we see so many different types of businesses, and we're always very concerned about fall hazards, because fall hazards are really how people can really get hurt. And this is something we're 100% behind, this, the National Safety Stand Down. And of course, what's the goal here? We're just trying to raise awareness about fall hazards, share how to prevent fatalities and eliminate falls, because, they are preventable. And the 2024 National Stand Down is occurring around the world. Its focus is on on fall hazards that they face and the ways to survive them. We're trying to highlight that and address other safety hazards that that come about daily. And this is kind of the slide I wanted to talk a little bit about. So why is fall protection so important? Why is it so important to address fall hazards? You can see there there were 5,486 deaths overall in 2022. And of course, that's way too many. But you can also see, if you go down a little bit, you can see the fall fatalities, slips, trips, and falls. 865 of those deaths were from falls. And it's really split between construction and non-construction. It's about 50-50 almost, 410 from construction, 455 from non-construction. And that was a little bit surprising to me. And the other thing that I think you should note on this slide is that a lot of the falls are from the same level. 144 of those fatalities actually occurred on the same level. And you can see most of those were in the non-construction industry. So falls to a lower level, that was, of course, many. And again, the importance here is to maybe get a handle on the numbers and understand that this is a big topic. It's something that we in the health and safety business really want to help employers and employees address and do anything we can to save lives out there. Just these top 10 most cited standards really are almost all very similar every year. But the point that I wanted to bring here, this is from 2022. Fall hazards are really on what, 3 or 4 of these. You got fall protection, you got ladders, you got scaffolding, and fall protection training. So in 2022, these are very common citations that you face in industry and in construction. And then again, we go to 2023. Again, what I want to point out is that fall protection, these are violations are, again, some of the top 3 or 4 of the top 10. You have residential construction, you have ladders, you have training, you have unprotected sides and edges, aerial lifts, roofing work, scaffolds. So you can see how so many of these, the violations are really related to some type of fall hazard. And again, if you drill down even further, you can see from the construction standard 1910, 26,500 to 503, where are these citations occurring? Fall protection, residential construction, training for those exposed to fall hazards, unprotected sides and edges, roofing work on low slope roofs, and written certification records for training. So these are where the violations are coming from. So again, we want to address these. And so something, of course, we all know, but let's say it again, is, falls are preventable. We all have a role in helping to prevent falls. We all want to have a combined effort to work together to prevent falls when we're out there. You guys, a lot of you guys are consultants, so you're out in the field seeing these things. Others of you are employers, or you have employees. We all need to work together, combine our efforts, and really try to find these fall hazards, fix these fall hazards, and give employees the resources that they need and the knowledge they need to address the fall hazards in the workplace. Again, this is just our website. If you ever want to talk to somebody from OSHA consultation, certainly no charge. You can contact us. That's our website. You can actually request a visit. And of course, there's a little bit of contact information from me. But thank you again for the opportunity to talk today. And let's all work together to eliminate fall hazards out there in the workplace.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
So with that, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Eric Hoffman. He is the Certification and Education Manager for the Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry. Eric is here to talk to us about the financial impacts of falls in the workplace. Eric?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me this morning. As Sean said, my name is Eric Hoffman. I'm the manager of Health and Safety Department within the Bureau of Workers' Compensation. We are the agency or the department in workers' comp in charge of trying to keep you off workers' compensation. Financial impacts of falls, as all the speakers had said before, it impacts a lot of the workforce out there. Just a few stats as far as the cost of falls are concerned. 15.57 billion is spent on falls every year nationally. Here in Pennsylvania, in 2022, our 2023 stats for as far as workers' compensation is concerned should be out within the next month or two, but will be very similar, a slight fluctuation maybe in the percentage and numbers, but very similar to 2022. Falls from the same level in Pennsylvania accounted for 17,772 workers' comp cases. That is about 10% of the total number of cases. Now, when we're talking about from a higher level, it accounts for about 2.6% of those number of falls. But the cost of falls goes so much further than just the monetary costs. There are costs to the company. These are different financial aspects that cost companies, direct and indirect costs. A lot of us have in the safety field have seen or talked about the iceberg effect as far as indirect versus direct and how much companies spend on those versus each other. Legal and regulatory consequences. Obviously, you can, in this day and age, it seems like everybody is suing. So you have that ramifications as well, being able to be sued. Reputational damage, being able to tout a good safety record. That affects businesses where you're going out and trying to bring in businesses or to promote your business. A lot of times they're looking at your safety record as to whether or not they're going to hire you as a consultant or the contractor. Long-term consequences, and then we talk about different financial stability of the company, being able to move forward as far as the claims are concerned and the monetary aspect of that. Now, what does it cost the person that actually has endured the injury? Physical, obviously, suffering, pain. A lot of times, fractures, head traumas, chronic, we don't really ever recover from those aspects. Emotional, psychological, different anxieties, having to deal with that pain, PTSD, depression. A lot of times, if it's serious enough, you lose your independence. Having the ability to walk on your own, to get around on your own, or mobility factor. Family and social consequences. A lot of stress, and trying to pay the bills, trying to go from one paycheck to another, causes a lot of family and social consequences. Then, this is just a few of the things that impact the falls. We do a ton of different other things in addition to fall protection. We do have 219 different safety topics that we utilize, as well as we promote for everybody out there in the field to utilize as well. You can certainly ask for any of our resources. We will provide any resources that are available that we have to you in any of the different safety topics that we have. We also offer a certified safety committee program within Pennsylvania. You get a 5% discount within your workers' comp premiums if you get a certification or a certified safety committee. So again, we're out there trying to promote fall protection as well as other safety aspects through safety committees through discussion, through the monthly meetings, ways to prevent those different falls, some sorts of falls. Their QR codes are ability to get on our calendars. We do offer webinars, 2 to 3 a day, safety shorts as well. They are free of charge and for anybody that likes to or would like to take part in that. I know a lot of OSHA has participated in those. So we reach out to OSHA as well and try to get them to participate in those webinars as well. So you know, we're here to help out in any way possible. And again, our services are free of charge. So if there's anything that we can do, we would be more than welcome to help you out.
Thank you, Eric. Really good information. And just to reiterate too, there's a lot of resources out there. You know, we have OSHA. You know, it's not just you know, the fines or anything like that. OSHA, I think, and Kevin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. OSHA wants to help. They'd rather be brought in beforehand, before something happens, when you have those questions. So reach out to your area offices, look up the available resources, reach out to RETTEW where we can help you, and you know, we can work together to prevent these injuries. So thank you, Dan, and thanks, Eric, for your information this morning. So we are going to go on to our next presenter, Mr. Ed Kaufman, our training center manager here at RETTEW. Ed's going to talk about implementing a fall protection program for those of you who may be starting that process. Ed.
Great, thank you very much.
You got a little more. Eric might have more information there. Keep going.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. There we go.
There we are. All right, everybody, there we go. So I'm just going to touch on a couple different things today. Mostly going to talk conceptually about some best practices and some key elements for implementing an effective fall protection program. So these are some of the elements we're going to touch on. We're going to discuss performing hazard analysis, developing a written fall protection and prevention procedure, you know, proper equipment maintenance, training and education, routine inspections, and also a review and update of the fall protection program as well. So the first thing I want to touch on here a little bit is going to be performing hazard analysis. There's a couple concepts we really want to make sure we have a good understanding of when we start developing this. So first step is always going to be to identify our potential hazards that we may have. Our potential hazards ranging from an opening in the floor to falling off the side of a 20-foot building. A variety of different hazards could be present, but it's very important that we're looking and we're assessing every potential hazard we may find in a variety of workplaces we work in. The next is going to be assessing risk, and that's why I included this risk assessment matrix in here. And basically all it is just looking at two key concepts, which is going to be the severity and the probability of an incident happening. And basically using this table to determine how frequent this potential occurrence could be, and also how catastrophic it may be if it does occur. So you can see we typically will start to categorize these by the likelihood of something happening and also how bad it will be when it happens. It's just a key element of that risk assessment. The hierarchy of controls, specifically related to fall protection, we'll discuss that here in a little bit. I have an additional slide to review with that, but it's important to understand that there's always going to be a hierarchy of risk controls that we're looking at. Basically starting with the elimination or a way to substitute the actual hazard itself, and then ultimately getting down to a lower level where we're focused on protecting employees from said hazard if we can't avoid that hazard altogether. And then performing a job hazard analysis, which is basically just a step-by-step look at a scope of work and just assessing each potential risk we may encounter, each potential hazard we may encounter as a part of each function of that job. And then exposure control plan, basically taking all that information together and creating and developing a plan that would be all-encompassing and comprehensive for those specific risk exposures. And of course, documentation, obviously making sure we have records of all the assessments we're performing, making sure we have all the training and everything kept up to date, and everything in accordance in case anyone does request that documentation, or we want to review that documentation internally for improvement. And there again, that kind of takes us into that review and update, just understanding that these programs are not designed to be static. They're designed to be a living document. They're designed to have feedback incorporated into them, and corrective actions and corrective measures being taken to improve those processes over time so they don't become stale or stagnant. And we may be leaving certain hazards unidentified within that process as well. And the hierarchy of risk controls for fall protection. So specifically, you'll just see a pictogram here. It's just going to give you some basic information on what the hierarchy would be. So the first we're always going to look at is eliminating the fall hazard altogether. That's why you can see in that picture, you'll see someone using a tool to access something at heights to prevent them from actually being at heights to eliminate that fall hazard altogether. The next step being obviously what would be installing passive fall restraint, which would be guardrails and things like that. You're seeing in the second picture there, another effective step. And as we keep moving up, you'll start to see it becomes inherently more dangerous and riskier. And typically these levels of protection will only look at certain elements, whether it comes from protecting someone from a fall or actually protecting them when they fall. So that's where fall restraint versus fall arrest comes into play. So you'll see the third level here would be fall restraint, protecting people from the actual fall hazard itself by using some means of physical restraint attached to the person. And then also fall arrest system, which means, okay, if someone does fall from that height, we're going to protect them, which would be a life-saving technique, but that ultimately will not protect them in its entirety, like some of the other previous steps we discussed. And then the last would be establishing a controlled access zone with, flagging system and making sure that people are staying away from the physical hazard. But there again, that's always going to be one of our last lines of defense because that's always going to have the greatest margin for error. And also there's no physical component to actually protect the individual from that fall hazard. The next portion being developing that written fall protection and prevention procedure or policy. And essentially just developing that comprehensive plan that's going to take all the specific hazards we have in place and put them into policy. And it would include any specific or unique hazards we may encounter, and also any high-risk tasks that may require certain levels of fall protection or prevention to be put in place when performing, kind of in conjunction with like our job hazard analysis that we just discussed. And of course, as part of that procedure, we'll also want to make sure we have an emergency response plan in place for the adequate and prompt response to an emergency involving a fall, and how we're going to get that person down, how we're going to get that person treated, how we're going to get them away from that hazard, and time always being a factor. So it's always important to have that program in place as well as a portion of that to make sure that we're adequately prepared and ready when someone does have a fall, and how we're going to protect them and get them as quickly to medical treatment as possible. And then also the other element to this is always going to be engaging feedback, especially from people at the ground level or workers, to make sure that the program is applicable and effective. So we always want to make sure we're getting that feedback from the ground level and we're incorporating that into our fall protection and prevention program. That's the key element there. And then also making sure we're properly equipped. A couple key elements here. Regular and routine inspections of the equipment, always ideal to make sure there's no type of equipment failure in the event they're being used to protect an individual from a fall. Inventory tracking is always a very important element as well. They started putting the air tags on harnesses. That's always been really effective when you're trying to find a harness that may have been misplaced, making sure that we're keeping record of that. especially making sure that we're tagging any equipment out that may be damaged or ineffective, and being able to repair that and keeping that trail of documentation with that specific piece of equipment. There again, it kind of ties into that would be the maintenance records for that equipment as well. And also, as a part of that, we can also do we can have an equipment upgrade plan to make sure that we're not using obsolete or ineffective tools. As technology progresses, we may find different tools that could be more effective to protect our employees from specific hazards. So having that kind of built into that equipment program is also going to be a very effective element to make sure that you're kind of planning for the obsolescence of certain equipment and also planning for the natural degradation or breakdown of that equipment as well. Having that plan in place kind of helps you think a little bit more forwardly about what the status of your equipment may be. And then, of course, incident reporting is always going to be a key element of this too, because we want to make sure that we know what equipment may have been damaged or may have been involved in an incident, so that way we can adequately make sure that that's been inspected and reviewed for future use, so it's not put back out into the field. It's a very common occurrence, just human error. It happens a lot, but making sure that we have that built into our incident reporting is going to make it's going to ensure that we have a documented process for putting that equipment back into service after it was involved in a potential incident. Accessibility is also very key. I actually had an incident that occurred a little while back involving, it was a good situation, but someone was having a vehicle serviced and certain equipment was outfitted for specific hazards that were required part of the job. And unfortunately, that individual had to grab another vehicle from the motor pool, and it did not have the correct fall protection equipment in the vehicle to do the work. So the individual smartly didn't stop work and had another crew member drive the vehicle in with the equipment they needed to do the work safely. And they actually used that equipment, and they documented the process and escalated it so that way we could make sure that all the vehicles were properly equipped with that. But just making sure that all employees have access to the necessary equipment they need to do their job safely is obviously key, and making sure that employees know where that information is and what to do in a situation when they do not have that equipment available, what the correct procedure would be for that as well. And then also making sure that we're following manufacturer's guidelines for whether it be upkeep, maintenance, inspection, any other regulatory means would also be a key element of that as well. Training and education portion here, making sure that when we're training and educating employees that they understand how to identify and recognize hazards that they may encounter in the workplace. Making sure they have a knowledge of the equipment, both a educational foundation and also a practical foundation for that to be able to use that equipment effectively in the field. Understanding some of the regulatory compliance elements is also a key piece of information there. Understanding why, not just that you have to follow A, B, C, D. Understanding conceptually why that compliance element may be in place and why we have to do certain things in certain events. Having that rescue team properly trained as new equipment comes out. Let's say your rescue team has some new key elements included in their rescue equipment that they need to be trained on. Having that updated rescue training and building that planning in on an annual basis is key, and also a requirement to make sure that our rescue teams are adequately prepared and properly trained and just refreshed on what some of the hazards could be in those specific circumstances. And also just not going over the compliance element, also going over what some of the best practices are and the safe work practices are. We don't want to just go the speed limit. We also want to make sure that we're developing an effective and comprehensive program by building in best practices and having redundancies and having strategies in place that can prevent any type of potential for injury or incident. And also just continuous learning and education is always going to be key. We don't want to have a one and done program. Obviously, there are going to be certain topics specifically related to fall protection that employees may have to do on a regular or routine basis, but also just making sure that we're not just showing the same 10-minute video to employees and then handing them a harness year after year. We want to make sure that we're making that as robust and building on the foundational knowledge that our staff has year over year. So always make sure that we want to build that continuous learning model. And the other big element of this is always going to be practical training. Anybody can learn anything in a classroom, but when you hand somebody equipment and ask them to go do it in the field, that's a whole different ballgame. So having those practical elements built into your training is always going to be critical. It's very easy to talk about how to use a gas meter, and it's always going to be very, very simple to explain to someone why you may need certain elements of fall protection when you're going into a confined space. But there again, having them actually use that equipment and understand what both the limitations of that equipment and also what the function of that equipment is going to be critical to their understanding, especially when you put somebody in something like like an SRL, so they understand functionally where the stop is going to happen. Also with a lanyard, understanding how far they're going to fall. Elements like that are always going to be key, and they're always going to be unique based on what the specific hazards may be. And there again, incident reporting, taking those near misses, taking those incidents and drawing from them and educating employees on them, whether it be in a toolbox talk, whether it be an all hands meeting, whatever it may be. It's always important that we're looking at what has happened and we're using that to translate to our staff what the potential hazards they may be dealing with on a day-to-day basis to avoid the apathy or risk normalization that sometimes we'll see when we do the same job routinely. And the other element when it comes to training and education is always going to be feedback. Listening to what the employees are saying, hey, this doesn't really apply to what we do. Or, hey, I think we should probably focus more time on this element because this is something that our business has been moving towards in a greater degree. Getting that feedback and updating that training, using that feedback is always going to be critical. And then there again, also another element is going to be routine inspections, just assessing risk factors, looking at some of the environmental conditions, circumstantial conditions, seasonal conditions, whenever we're doing inspections of different work sites, looking at how some of those fall hazards may become more severe or have a greater likelihood of occurring based on what some of the conditions may be. And there again, just making sure we're keeping documentation of that. We're putting strategies in place to address any hazards we're identifying through our inspections, and making sure that we have documentation of a mitigation strategy that we may have used, and also testing that to make sure that it's effective before it's implemented, across the entire spectrum of the work. And there again, just making sure that we have that in place, and making sure that we have documentation to see what's working, how we can effectively protect employees, and if something isn't working, getting that feedback and then coming back with additional corrective actions or looking at things from a different perspective. And the last element is just to make sure that you keep this program alive and make sure that you have buy-in, you have support both from the top and at the ground level. We want to make sure that the program has the teeth and the authority to be implemented effectively, but we also want to make sure that it's practical and functional enough that employees that are going to be using this program are bought in and engaged in this actual program. So that way we have both the authority and we have the effectiveness of that program always kind of developed and always kind of growing within that culture. And there again, we never want to stop this process. We want to make sure it's continuous. We want to make sure we're always looking at how we can improve that, whether that be through feedback, whether that be through having multiple disciplinary committee guidance, meaning having someone from each department talk about how they're applying this fall protection program and how it's effective for them, how it may not be effective for them, what their employees are encountering versus other employees. And then they're of course also doing, pilot testing of interventions, or a better way to put that would be to use small scale controls to determine if a strategy is going to be effective, and kind of seeing what the potential consequences of that could be, and then having some data, having some feedback is always going to be better than implementing something across the board reactionarily from a perspective. It's always going to be best that we test this and make sure it's effective before we implement it, let's say company-wide. And using information technology, making sure that we're using all the tools accessible to us to improve our process, to document, retain information. Just another key element to make sure we use all the technology available to us to improve our process, whether it be digitizing certain analog processes, or it may be, like we said, air tagging harnesses to make sure we know the locations of them and make sure that we can complete routine inspections of those. Just making sure that we're staying up on those technologies and incorporating them into our actual program. And also just have cultural buy-in. Just make sure that people understand what the hazards are, make sure they understand how we're keeping them safe, but also make sure that we're providing that feedback and we're providing that encouragement to the staff that may be exposed to these hazards, and let them know what the emphasis would be. So that's all I have for today. Thank you everyone for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ed.
We should clap after everybody.
I don't know. We should.
I was sitting here waiting for someone else to do it. Like,
Right.
So I hope you all clocked online too. So thank you, Ed. And one of the things that we do here at RETTEW is education is important, right? And going through what the standard says or what best practices are. But at RETTEW also, we like to do hands-on. So most of our trainings contain some hands-on element. Now, being virtual and in person, we can't do hands-on, but some of our consultants did create a video showing the hands-on of the A, B, C's, and D's. D's is one of the things Ed talked about in his presentation. We prep for a fall, we hope a fall doesn't happen, but what happens if we have a fall? So how do we rescue those folks? So we're gonna have some of our consultants roll through that video here for you. When we talk about safety and we talk about devices or processes, I think it's important for anyone to understand that these things are there for a reason. They shouldn't be overlooked, because at the end of the day, these things are there to protect us from what we're doing in our everyday job.
First off, we have the A, B, C, D fall protection. A standing for your anchorage devices, B being your body protection, C being your connectors, and then D being the last component of that, often overlooked, is the rescue component. When we talk about fall protection, right, it protects you from hitting the ground, right? Better than fall protection is fall prevention devices. So when we talk about fall prevention, that would be your fall restraints, guardrail, things like that. It's going to be much more effective because it's actually preventing the user from falling altogether. Whereas fall protection is the individual would fall, and it keeps them from hitting a lower level or some hazardous condition. First, our A's. We have a couple of different types of anchorage devices that you could use. Keep in mind, anchorage devices need to be connected to some type of structural component that is rated for at least 5,000 pounds or twice the intended load, whichever is less. Right? So this would be an example of a beam slider. This could be connected to some type of structural beam. It can slide along that beam as the user progresses. Fire protection is going to be some type of fall protection harness, much like this one here. This is an MSA. There's a lot of different brands out there, a lot of different styles. This is a fairly basic style of fall harness. Looking through this harness, a couple things you'll notice on here. We have our back D-ring, our dorsal ring. This should be positioned right between the shoulder blades of the user. So when we do our inspection, we want to make sure all the connections are working properly, and all of our adjustments are tightened down so that if the user does fall, that harness doesn't slide up or cause any damage as a result of that. Our leg straps, right? We need to make sure that these are on our legs and actually being used, right? And all of our connections are securely fitted. So moving on to our C's, our connectors, a couple different styles of connections we have here. We have a lifeline. I believe this is a 20-foot fall protection lifeline. It is retractable, meaning that as the user moves around and walks around, this cable is going to come out of the main housing here, and then if they were to fall, it's going to catch. And then our last component, again, often overlooked, people tend to forget about this one, is our D. This is going to be our fall rescue, right? So again, if we are using fall protection, such as all these devices that we just talked about, we need to have some type of rescue plan in place. Whether we are working 100 feet up in the air or 10 feet off the ground, we need to have some type of rescue plan. Because if somebody were to fall, if they hang there for more than 50 minutes, they risk the chance of developing some type of fall trauma as a result of it. So a rescue plan doesn't have to be anything very formal. It could be a simple plan just discussed between the user and maybe their ground person saying, hey, if I were to fall, we're going to bring over a ladder or a lift to get me, off of that suspended lanyard or wherever they're hanging from. Keep in mind, these devices are only effective if they're being used by that individual, right? So these are not doing any good if they're not being worn properly, if they're not being used properly, or if they're not being used at all. The individual will fall and they're going to contact the lower surface, resulting in an injury or even a fatality.
Okay, I'd like to thank our consultant, Noah Hakes, for putting that video together for us. So as we talk about, as Noah rolled us through the A, B, C, and Ds, we are going to turn it over to Ashley Luce, our consulting manager here at RETTEW, who's going to talk about fall protection devices.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ashley Luce. Okay, so we are going to talk again about the ABCD system. More so this time, I'm talking more about the equipment and the devices. So here, although this seminar is primarily focused on the construction industry, there are other industries where fall protection could come into play. So for construction, your tie-off point, anytime you're working above 6 feet. General industry, anytime you're working above 4 feet. Long shoring, anytime you're working above 8 feet. Shipyards, anytime you're working above 5 foot. And then with scaffoldings, you have to be tied off anytime you're working on a scaffold that is 10 foot, or if you're higher than that. Okay, so in our ABC system, A stands for acreage points. Again, as Noah described earlier, those tie-off systems have to be rated for at least 5,000 pounds, or twice the intended load. So working from left to right here, we have an I-beam anchor, so that will clamp right onto an I-beam. You can tie off to that tie-off point that is there. Next, we have a concrete anchor, so you would pre-drill a hole, and then you would slide the concrete anchor into there, and you would tie off to that blue section. Next, we have a sling anchor. These are very unique in the sense that you can get them in all different lengths and sizes. So if you had a larger piece of structural steel that you had to tie off to, you could use a sling anchor and you could tailor it to whatever size that you needed. And lastly, here we have a rooftop anchor. This is more so for wooden rooftops. You'll notice that there's little tiny holes in there. That way you could place nails in the anchor point and try to secure the device. And you would just tie off at the top point there. All right, next in our ABCD system is B for body harnesses. The main purpose of a body harness is to distribute the weight of the fall, right? So we don't want all of the forces from the weight of the fall to be in one area of our body. So the main purpose is to distribute it between our upper portions of our body. So the most common harness that's used out there is a full body harness. That's the very first one that you can see that's located there on the left-hand side. I would say 95% of the time in the construction industry, that is probably the most common harness that I've come across. Next is a positioning harness. So this is very nice for folks that literally need to have good positioning whenever they're performing work. So a good example of this would be like an electrical contractor, where they need to work on a telephone pole and they need to be in a specific location for an extended period of time. They would use the positioning harness. And then lastly here, we have a rescue harness. So everyone spoke today about the importance of having some form of a rescue setup. So maybe your rescue plan is having someone physically go down and rescue someone. This is the type of harness that you would use for that. You'll notice that there's a D-ring right on the center there. That way the person that's rescuing can invert down, clip into the person that they're rescuing, and bring themselves back up. Again, what's really nice about these harnesses is they do save lives each and every day. So make sure that you're clipping your lanyard onto the back and you're connecting to your anchor point. Next, we have our connectors or our lanyards. For this, there's two major types of lanyards that are out there. We have a self-retracting lanyard. That kind of just acts as like a seatbelt. Your fall distance on that type of a lanyard is going to be very short. Where a shock-absorbing lanyard, which is the other one that you see there on the right-hand side, I don't know if you can see like the bunched up webbing that you see there. When there is a fall that occurs, that webbing will break open. So on a standard 6-foot lanyard, if the person's not up at least 18.5 feet, unfortunately, the person's going to hit the ground. So my favorite of the two of these is the self-retracting lanyard because your fall distance is not going to be as far. Okay, next up we have descent and rescue. So here's just a couple of descent and rescue pieces of equipment that are out there. The most common one is on the left-hand side. You'll notice here, this gives you a 3-to-1 mechanical advantage. You can either lower the person down to the lower level, or you can raise them up to the level at which the descent rescue system is tied off. The next two, we have a rescue winch and rescue wristlets. Those two are really good if you have someone who maybe falls into a manhole, you need to rescue them out of the manhole or out of a confined space. You could use that for rescue. The very next one is our rescue ladder system. This is going to be used for self-rescue. So let's say you have a guy who's fallen, they're able to swing themselves over to get to the ladder and self-rescue and climb themselves up that ladder or down the ladder, depending on the situation. And then lastly here, my favorite is this self-rescue pack. So this self-rescue pack is very nice because it comes in 50-foot and 100-foot distances. So if someone were to sustain a fall, all that they would have to do is pull that ripcord and it will slowly lower them down to the next surface. Next here I have a couple of mobile fall protection systems. That cart that you see on the left-hand side, I, over the years, have seen that used quite a bit on rooftop projects. So there are tie-off points there, and if someone were to sustain a fall from that cart, there's things that come out of it that will actually jam into the roof, and it will not allow the cart to fall over with the person. So it will actually hold the person. And then the next system that we see on the right-hand side that is attached to the trailer hitch, a lot of times that is used for manhole fall protection. So you can tie off there at the top, and you can also perform rescue with that system as well. So both Ed and Noah earlier today hit on the importance of training and education. When you are training your folks, you need to make sure that you train them per the manufacturer's recommendations. Every manufacturer may have different recommendations as far as how long a harness is good for or what you need to inspect on that harness. So make sure that you're training your workers, make sure that you're using it according to the manufacturer's recommendations.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you.
Great information. So with that, some of our RETTEW staff have put together an additional video on how to don, doff, and inspect a safety harness. So we have our teammates here, Noah Hakes and Samantha Harsh.
The first thing we want to make sure we do is that we have it either hanging or we're holding it by the back dorsal D-ring. That way we can get an overview of the whole harness at once and so that nothing is tangled. So we're going to first take a look at all of our webbing. We're going to make sure that we inspect for any tears, any frays in the webbing, and just any corroded materials. Make sure there's not too much writing or any writing at all so you can still see if there's any problems with it. So our next step is going to be actually looking at the hardware pieces, so our back D-ring, and we're going to be looking at our connecting straps. So we want to check for any damaged pieces. We want to look for any bent, cracked, distorted. If we have anything of that, we're going to take it out of service. We want to check down here on our leg straps. We want to look at the pieces to make sure that these are all intact. If we're missing any of the grommets, we don't want to use this harness because it will tear to the next one and that will cause it to break. So once we make sure that all of our metal pieces are good to go, we are going to move on to our impact indicators. So the impact indicators will be located on the back of our harness. Sometimes you will see the word impact indicator, sometimes you will not. If you do not, you want to make sure you check to see that it is still stitched together like this. If it is not, then it most likely has been subject to a fall. When it comes to an impact indicator, if that is showing, it will be a red line. And if that is being shown, then you want to make sure you take it out of service. So there's one on each side. We want to make sure we check both of them and that the stitching is still intact. Okay, so the next thing we're going to check is our labels on our harness. We want to check to make sure that there is an inspection log that you can sign off on. These should be inspected prior to each use and also monthly, and they should be documented on the tag. These will also give you information on what size they are, if they're ANSI approved, and how much weight can be held inside of these. Most of the time, it'll be about 130 to 310 pounds, depending on which harness you're using. But you just want to check to make sure that you see that in the tags. So if all of that is good to go, you've checked out all your pieces, everything looks like it is ready, we're going to then don the harness. So after we're finished inspecting our harness, we are going to don or put on our harness. So the first thing we want to make sure again is that nothing's tangled. So grab it by the back D-ring, you're going to shake it, make sure nothing is twisted, and that you're able to put it on. So we're going to take and grab it and put it on like a jacket. So you're going to put one arm through, and then you're going to put your other arm through to make sure that nothing gets twisted in the process. We are then going to turn around, and we are going to check to make sure that our back D-ring is in between our shoulder blades. We don't want it up too high, we don't want it down too low. So once that is adjusted, we're going to turn back around. And we are going to look at our chest strap. So on some harnesses, the chest strap may look like this. So with these ones, you're going to hook it together. And you're going to make sure that it is about in the center of your stomach and chest. After this is all adjusted and you pull these to make sure it is all tightened up, you're going to move to your leg straps. So you want to grab the first one, you're going to bring it through, and you're going to hook it into its connecting. You want to make sure that you adjust it enough so you can still fit 2 fingers between yourself and your leg strap. You don't want it to be too tight or too loose. So once that one's done, you're going to move on to your second strap. You're going to do the same process of making sure it is secured and that you can fit 2 fingers between yourself and the strap. And then you're going to turn around, and something that I like to do is actually have somebody come up and just pull on it a little bit upwards to make sure nothing's too tight or uncomfortable. Once that is ready to go, you will be able to hook up your connecting device so that you can get onto your anchor.
Okay. I'd like to thank Sam and Noah, our 2 safety consultants who created that video for us. So now, as we move into the fun part, so no longer presentations, but we will have our panel discussion. It will be moderated by Paul O'Donnell, the corporate safety manager here for RETTEW. I believe we have Paul will be moderating that for us online. He has been collecting the questions from your Q&A session, and so then we will, I think, Kevin, what did you say earlier, we're going to try to stump the OSHA man, right? Or not try to stump the OSHA man. So, but again, we want to make sure that we answer any questions you all have, and so, Paul, with that, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Sean. Hey, good morning, everyone, and thank you again for attending. I guess, is there any questions in the room with the panel? Should we start with that? Any questions in the room with the panel? All right, hearing none, then if you have questions, remind everybody to enter them in the chat function, and we'll get them out. We have a few questions to get us started. The first question comes to us from a Stephen Carlton, and he would like to know, when there is no suitable anchor point overhead.
We plan for some IT snafus, that's okay.
Can you hear me, Sean? Sean, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, there we go.
All right. So just to repeat, our first question is coming in from a Stephen Carlton, and he would like to know, when there is no suitable anchor point overhead, as an example, when you're working on top of an HVAC unit, can I complete a fall hazard assessment identifying the hazards and safe work procedures and not need a personal fall arrest system or fall protection devices? Everybody hear that question okay?
I heard the question. Anyone on our panel want to attack that question? Paul, can you restate the question one more time?
You betcha. When there is no suitable anchor point overhead, as an example, working on top of an HVAC unit, can I complete a fall hazard assessment identifying the hazards and safe work procedures and not need a personal fall arrest system or fall protection devices? Anybody want to field that?
Yeah, anybody want to jump on that? First grenade lobbed.
Well, okay, fine. I've always said that the most dangerous word in the occupational safety and health language is depends. And, looking at the basic information that was provided and whatnot, I mean, anytime, obviously, there's any fall above 6 feet, realizing this could also be potential general industry applications as well. OSHA generally does not work with risk assessment very well. And part of the issue with that is ultimately, depending on the, the height above the lower level of the HVAC unit, given the fact that usually a lot of your HVAC units of size end up being rooftop units, you have primary and secondary fall hazard. So if it's within something that we would allow a control line, which we allow for mechanical contractors to do, that could eliminate part one of the fall hazard. But at the same time, it's depending on the duration of the work and everything like that, there really is no provision within the OSHA standards to allow for development of a fall protection plan under 1926-502K, unless you're dealing with very specific types of industries of residential construction, precast concrete, and drawing of blank on number 3. But for mechanical contracting, usually it's not permissible. Can you reduce your risks? Are there ways of working around it? Of course. But again, it's all going to depend on the rest of the variables that were put forward by Mr. Steve Carlton, which has a great name.
Great. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to add to that?
Yeah, from what I've seen in the past, that mobile fall protection cart works very well for rooftop applications. Yes, you still have to use fall protection using that system. However, it can move with the person because it is on wheels.
All right. Thank you both.
You could even use some form of like equipment that would be rated for fall protection circumstances, like an aero boom lift or scissor lift in certain circumstances, and maybe perform that for the different.
Okay, great. Thank you all. Next question is coming in from a Miss Taryn Hatcher. Miss Taryn Hatcher would like to know, do I need fall protection while walking along the edge of an excavation? Do I need fall protection while walking along the edge of an excavation?
Depends.
Depends, right?
Depends.
How deep is my
How deep
excavation?
is the trench?
Right.
Well, how about if we give them that defining line and take the question from there? How's that? Sean, I'll allow you as the person in the room to pick the person that answers that question if we have no volunteers. How's that?
I'll ask the other Sean Rinaldi, what are your thoughts?
The standard actually doesn't require fall protection on the edge of an excavation unless the hazard is obscured by vegetation or some other means. So specifically, again, it depends, but the standard doesn't actually require fall protection unless it's obscured.
And so you're saying so obscured, like I know there's a hole there, but I don't know where the hole is at because I can't see it. Then I would need fall protection.
The ladder.
Got it. Okay. Think that
All right,
answers the
great.
question. Yeah.
The next question is coming to us from a Darren Dalton. He would like to know, do I need fall protection while climbing a ladder? Do you need fall protection while climbing a ladder?
Always have a
I
question.
get this question all the time in classes.
Dan, I'm gonna ask you, what do you think?
I'm going to defer to these safety people.
I'm gonna say it depends.
Yeah. Yeah.
If it's a fixed ladder or.
So I think like a fixed vertical ladder, I think the OSHA standard has recently changed where the cages go away and fall protection is required above a certain height. What's that?
32 feet.
Climbing system device.
Yeah, climbing system device. So, yeah, so for those fixed vertical ladders or access ladders, that would be needed. If I'm thinking, typically when I think ladder, I think a pop-up A-frame, what am I doing for my job? My answer is no. Unless I think Sean or Kevin touched on a little bit earlier. Obviously, I never want to have a ladder near an edge. Sometimes our work takes us there. If I have that ladder near an edge, then I wouldn't need fall protection in that instance. I still need to get my job done, right? So I know Kevin talked about risk and safety, and OSHA don't always mix. I'm always on the risk perspective. I know what the regulation is. What's my best way to implement it and get the job done? Because at the end of the day, I'm here to make money. My business is in business to make business, right? So, and I know OSHA supports that, but that'd be my answer. So when I think the A-frame ladder, no. If I'm not near the edge, I'm not within the fall radius of the edge, I don't need it on my A-frame ladder. If I am, I do need it. Obviously, we know the fixed portable ladders, we need that climbing system device.
Great.
Thanks, Dalton.
So the next question, unfortunately, is coming in from an anonymous user or anonymous somebody that's online. Is there any restriction in the regulation about age or health condition to work at heights? I'll repeat that again. Is there any restriction in the regulation about age or health condition to work at heights? Coming in from an anonymous participant.
So Kevin, I saw you shaking your head, so I'm lobbing this one to you, because I have my own thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, let's start with the easy one. First of all, to finish my last question, leading edge was the third qualifier for 502K. New. So I had to double check it. As far as from age standpoint, within Fair Labor Standards Act, which is something OSHA doesn't enforce, but our wage and hour division does, there is a provision requiring the amount of work on a construction site that a miner can perform is extremely small. Anytime you're going to be dealing with anything involving any profound amount of protective equipment, use of power tools, fall protection definitely falls in that as well. It's going to be 18 or up until you're going to be legally permitted to have somebody do that work. We run into this quite a bit in this part of the country because there's a lot of younger folks in the Amish Mennonite community that they learn with their family members. We've had fatalities for people as young as 17 years in 1 week recently, and even younger than that. As far as for health restrictions, ultimately, the requirements for using, any type of device under 1926 subpart X is going to go back for the use of either a competent or qualified person, depending on what standard you're looking at. And at that point, the part of that competent qualified person that's going to be directing ladder and fall protection use, they're the ones that are ultimately responsible for directing the work. And if they have somebody who, you know, has some degree of physical limitation, age requirement or something like that, obviously, they're going to be accepting an unnecessary, I mean, the standard, there's no prohibition, but they're going to be accepting, you know, we're going to talk about risk now, accept an unnecessary risk for having somebody who has physical limitation. I know personally, I'm not all original parts. My left knee has been replaced. But years ago, after I had an earlier knee surgery, I had climbed a ladder during an inspection. And I remember the contractors, you know, the workers on site laughing at me because I was very gingerly going up the ladder. So while I was physically capable of doing it, they thought it was kind of funny until I presented violations of all, and they stopped laughing.
Right.
And yeah, qualified, competent or qualified person is the person, you know, the individual is really going to be saying, you know, Bob, you know, stay down here.
And that's a good point. I think when you talk about competent and qualified, it's up to the company to determine who that is, who that representative is, job site by job site, especially in construction.
We actually had an individual a few years ago had a combination of a pre-existing medical condition, heat syncopate, actually fell from a ladder while working. So it was a combination of variables that created a bit. Fortunately, he, you know, was able to, you know, he had a ride in an ambulance, but was able to, you know, didn't die or wasn't significantly injured. But yeah, it was a combination, like I mentioned, a pre-existing medical condition. It was, you know, a shameless plug for heat, you know, illness prevention here, and resulted in falling to a lower level off of the ladder, 6-7 feet, and had enough injury that was required for follow-up medical attention.
I think that's important too. And we talked about it in a couple of presentations about talking to your employees, talking to your end users, because there's also, take out of the safety context, now you can go to ADA. You know, you can talk to your HR folks, or they report, you know, they report something. In my history, my previous employer, we would have folks, we used powered industrial trucks that were going 30 feet in the air. If they had documented vertigo cases, obviously I don't want to put them there where they're a risk to themselves or other people. But you need your employees to disclose those, because we all know we can't go walk around and say, what's your medical condition? What's your medical condition? Can't do that. But if they disclose it, then we should train to it, educate to it, and ultimately, you know, maybe we refrain them from that type of work. So, but that's a good anonymous question.
And some of the training elements will, you know, we'll select individuals out based on capability of performing the duties as well. So, you know, if someone was assigned to rescue and they had to, you know, they had to perform some level of physical exertion to complete that rescue, that sometimes would be a conversation that would happen before an actual emergency occurs.
Yeah, if you're pre-planning, I want to know. You know, I don't like tight spaces. Well, we're doing a confined space entry, right? Thank you, Paul. Any other questions?
So we have one last one here, unless others come in, from an Ashland Sullivan. How often am I required to inspect my fall protection equipment, and is it required to be documented? How often am I required to inspect my fall protection equipment, and is it required to be documented?
I'm looking at my compliance manager.
Yes. So you should inspect your fall protection, your entire system. So that includes your anchor point, your lanyards, your harness, everything like that before each use. And then you should also have it inspected annually by a third party is what I would recommend. And yes, it should be documented because everything should be documented. If it's not documented, it wasn't completed.
That's a good, yeah. If it's not documented, it's not done.
Yeah.
Good point. Anybody have any additional thoughts to that? I will say, so it is required, in my professional opinion, it is required annually, because if you look at your devices, you look at your harnesses, you look at your SRLs, they actually have a place to my documented annual inspection. And Ashley's right. I think it should be a third party, at least a third party to the user. Maybe if it's my harness, I'm not the one who does that annually. Maybe somebody in my company does, who we've identified as competent and capable in doing those things. but it does need to be done at least annually. And I always told folks, you're putting this on for a reason. Hopefully you never ever need it, but you want to make sure if you ever do need it, it's going to work. So check it every time you put it on.
And the only thing I would ask, and maybe pose this question here, is there an element of documentation required to pre-use inspection as well, specifically within the action standard?
From OSHA standpoint, no. The focus is much more on the training element under section 503. And even then, I mean, it's going to be, part of the training process is, how to don, doff, inspect, and all, everything else involved with it. And unfortunately, it just doesn't happen as much as it should.
So I think Paul said that was our last collected online question. Do we have any questions here in the room? Bill?
SRLs. I found myself in a position where I had an SRL, but it wasn't the right one. They have evolved so that where it can be connected to an anchor point in relationship to the worker. Also, there's some other subtypes of SRLs. Maybe somebody could explain some of those variations.
I mean, I can. Where were you running into issues with it, and what application?
Okay, if you're on a rooftop and you're using one of those rooftop anchor points, that means that the SLR is on the anchor point or even mounted on their back, it's below their waist. And so there's an added distance that they're going to fall. There's also some variations as far as swing on them.
Correct.
And that's where I almost got in trouble. I had a proper SLR on a roof, warehouse roof, and I realized that the individuals were working towards the edge of the peak. And if they fell, there was going to be now a swing hazard as they went off the edge of the roof. So, and also there's variations of SRLs that serve as a rescue device in confined space operations, a hybrid. So it's really important that as you're looking at the application, looking at what the SRL is supposed to be rigged anchor point wise, the individual is protected.
Yeah, the design, the setup, absolutely. And the downside to the self-retracting lanyards is once you do get out a set distance, if, let's just say that our rooftop work was here, we had our SRL on, we came all the way over here and then fell off the edge of the roof, you are going to have that swing radius. So maybe in a situation like that, you're just going to use a shock absorbing lanyard. I mean, it's going to be a case by case basis as opposed to using a self-retracting lanyard. It's just going to depend on where your tie off point is and how your system is set up, where you're working out, what you're near. Absolutely.
I can back up what Ashley was saying. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the more, so many degrees off of perpendicular is going to end up causing a problem because you're going to have that much payout on the line. The biggest thing that had changed in recent years was they went from the Class A, Class B ratings for SRLs to a Class 1, Class 2, which Class 1 allows for overhead tile, Class 2 allows for a little bit wider. But the Class 1 also builds in the leading edge requirement. Classic example of that is folks that are doing ironwork. And they end up selecting something that they think is nice and robust for ironwork, but doesn't have that leading edge rating, and then they end up shock loading their SRL when they go overboard, and then, as it's coming back perpendicular, you've got that cable, or in some cases, like the nylon strap, for example, ends up riding right across your sharp edge, and you run the risk of your actual failure at that point. Before, because I know with Class A and B, when that was the criteria, you were dealing with either 24 or 54-inch potential free fall before it was guaranteed to bring you to a rest and stop. But with the Type 1 now, with the overhead, which is going to track more into your traditional 24, you're able to have that, amount of payout involved with it. But again, it's all going to come down to your calculations to avoid your swing falls, depending on where you are, what your application is, where you're standing, and, you know, and a lot of other variables. But thankfully, especially from the ANSI standard, that they've put enough engineering, like I mentioned earlier today, that you can actually pick your device as necessary. Because I know like folks that use an SRL when they're using in a view, you don't want to have a cable,
50-foot
you know,
cable box.
class 1 in there,
Yeah.
when you could use smaller, that's going to be a little bit more, you know, non-stressor friendly on your body. Plus, you know, it's just the portability and then adding the additional weight, like in a view, where you don't want to add, you know, 40-pound additional device when you have 500-pound rating on an area.
I think it goes, and, you know, Ashley's answer and Kevin's answer kind of, you know, when you take a step back, you got to identify, what am I planning for? What am I doing? Where am I doing it? How am I doing it? You know, we have, obviously, we have some chemical manufacturing folks in the room here today. I probably don't want to wear nylon in that environment. I probably want to go with a stainless steel or some kind of alloy cable. I just got to know what my exposures are. And very important when Sam and Noah were doing their video, refer to the manufacturer. Can be used here, shouldn't be used here, et cetera, and follow those recommendations. It's not a, fall protection specifically is not a one-size shoe. We talk about, and there's been things, I've seen changes in industry. We have some industrial suppliers here. For years, women's harnesses were, well, let's just give a men's small, all right? That's not the right answer. But we see more innovation coming from our manufacturers. Women have different body needs, different body types. So, you know, but make sure that, well, she's small, let's just give her a men's small. That's not the right answer. But always know, you know, assess what you're doing, Bill. Where am I doing it? Who's doing it? And how I'm going to do it. That'd be my answer.
And out of curiosity, Ashley touched on this. Is it a fixed anchor point, or did you have a mobile anchor in that circumstance?
Actually, I had a couple different buildings with different, you know, on one I had a horizontal line as an anchor point. On the other one, I had a fixed point. So, and by the way, none of you had jurisdiction because it was in Iraq, so.
Well, there you go. Do they have fall protection in Iraq?
On my projects, they did.
Yeah. Thank you, Bill. Any other questions from the room? Sam?
It's kind of just a general OSHA question, but what's like the hot topic right now with OSHA, and what are they like looking into more or researching more out in like construction per se? It's a hot topic.
With regulatory updates.
Heat.
He's probably the biggest thing.
He's definitely the one that's.
There was an update to the NEP for fall protection construction as well. The emphasis on.
There was and then most of the OSHA regions had regional emphasis programs for fall protection, and they pulled it into an actual full national emphasis program. It was basically, it superseded and expanded what the original, but you know, heat for certain. We actually have somebody visiting from the director of construction right now. I should have asked him yesterday. Trying to think, there's, I don't think there's any of the expanded health standards. I know they were looking at power industrial truck applications for both general industry and construction because they're due for a refresh for the standards. But it's,
Probably one of the bigger things that you're hearing about too is the walk around rule. You know, there's something that's been in the works, I think, since 2013, but they just released it, I believe it was in March. It's supposed to go live on May 31st. And basically, it comes out of 1903. And basically what it says is that an employee can select basically a third party representative who's not part of the company, or really, the answer is really anybody. They can select anybody to participate or represent the employees in an OSHA inspection.
Gotcha.
Like I said, it's supposed to go live May 31st. There's probably going to be some legal issues that it encounters before it goes live. I don't want to speak too much because I don't think anything has happened yet, but there could be a little bit of friction leading up to that point, so we'll see where that goes, but it's scheduled to go live May 31st.
Any other questions from the room? Yes, Craig.
One other thing that I was just thinking of, what about objects at heights? So your power tools and stuff that you're holding on to when you're working at heights. Has there been any movement with OSHA on that stuff? Tethering those items in your tools and hammers and stuff like that?
No, I mean, generally, it's just gonna fall into this, just an overhead strike hazard. And unfortunately, when you wanna look at the hierarchy of controls, you're getting down into the PPE part of it almost 100%. I know, like in power plants and whatnot, all the tools end up getting restrained. And especially iron work, they, have a tendency to lash off their spud wrenches and whatnot, so they don't, have hazard below. But for the most part, it's gonna end up being, staggering your work, which, just is a principle of operations for, running a site, and overhead protection either through, debris netting or hard hats, which are already existing standards. My suspicion is that were to get put out for commentary period, trying to bring that in as a wider portion of an existing standard, it would probably end up getting quite a bit of pushback from industry just because the costs involved with it.
My battery's dead.
Oh, well done.
Can you bring us back?
I have seen, because I always try to pay attention when I'm driving my construction sites, I have seen a lot more netting being used, which I'm kind of happy to see.
What's interesting, a lot of times, like with ironwork, the classic example is that they're doing one of those prefabricated steel warehousing type facilities. They'll a lot of times put the debris netting in as an underlayment before they put the final roofing deck on. And it's used, combination of debris netting, and usually it's got a 500-pound rating, for fall protection at the same time.
Yeah.
And it just ends up getting closed up in when they enclose the roofing or putting anything on the underside as well, depending if it's open joist or not. And it's nice because obviously you can have other trades working down there, and somebody dropping, a battery powered impact wrench or something, you don't have your nice impact kind of smash on the, the concrete below, but it provides a wider range of protection for you.
And we're back. Are we back? Just to say goodbye?
In the very corner down there.
Yeah.
There you go.
We're back. All right. So sorry about that. We had a small snafu. Any other questions in the room? But with that, I want to thank all of our panel attendees. So thank you very much today. We are wrapping up here. We are wrapping up here at 11 a.m. So I just want to reiterate, we have a lot of resources here. We have our team here from OSHA. OSHA is a resource. We have our team from the Department of Labor and our team from OSHA Outreach at IUP. Resources. You have us here at RETTEW. We're here to help you. So please reach out for any questions you have, any consultation you need, but that's what we strive to do. With that said, I'd like to again give our thanks to our panels. We did hold some giveaways, so we have some gifts for our folks in person. For our gifts out there in the internet land, we are randomizing and we'll be sending gift cards. We will post that. This event has been recorded. It will be emailed to our attendees, so you will have a copy of this, even with that little snafu at the end. But hey, it is what it is. So with that said, I'd like to say some special thank yous. Number one, to our team from OSHA, the Department of Labor, IUP, and my two great leaders here, Ed and Ashley. Thank you all for your involvement today. Again, one more round of applause. I'd like to give a thank you to our Vice President, BJ Patterson, because when I said to BJ, I was like, I want to do this. I can't tell you exactly what he said, but he's like, why the heck not? So thank you, BJ, for letting us do this. I want to thank Paul O'Donnell for being our moderator. I want to thank Zach Witt and Jen Baldwin from IT for who helped us out. Laurel Sukas and Mark Mahaffey and Sean Heisey from our Marcom. Sean's a helper for Marcom, but thank you. And I'd like to thank my team, Ashley, Ed, Lynn Reed, Noah Hake, Sam Harsh, Christina Harding, Steve Ziegler, and Nick Pugh. They are the best team here at RETTEW, and I thank them for that. So with that, we're going to sign off. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, online world. That's it.